This episode has been brought to you in part by the Azrieli Music Prizes, celebrating 10 years of promoting excellence in music composition. Come experience the musical imaginations of AMP's 4 extraordinary 2024 laureates. The Orchestre Symphonique de Montréal Chorus and Maestro Andrew McGill give the world premiere of their prize-winning works for the AMP Gala concert on October 28th at Maison Symphonique in Montreal. Learn more at azrielifoundation.org/AMP.
All Canadians deserve to be safe and to feel safe, regardless of where they live, work, gather, or pray. As public safety minister,
that's what it sounded like last week in Ottawa when Dominic LeBlanc, the federal minister of public safety, announced a revamp to the government's long-standing program that helps communities at risk of hate crime attacks beef up their security equipment. It's called the SIP program, which stands for Security Infrastructure Program. SIP's been around for 17 years. Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's government started it back in 2007 with only $1 million or $2 million a year to hand out. And the money wasn't just for Jews, it was shared by all at-risk minority groups, including LGBTQ and Indigenous and women's shelters, who wanted to put in security cameras and fencing and put in better lights and all that stuff. Not everybody was successful in getting the grants. When the money ran out, it ran out. Plus, Ottawa paid for only 50% of the costs. The rest had to be raised by the community group itself. Under the Trudeau Liberals, the funding for the SIP program grew exponentially. It's about $16 million a year now. And that's obviously because in the last few years, the country's faced an explosion in hate crimes during the pandemic and more recently leading up to and after October 7th. Still, for years, Jewish leaders have said the application process is too rigid, the money isn't enough, and the 50-50 split puts too heavy a burden on smaller congregations and schools, like in Fredericton, who had suffered vandalism but had struggled to raise their half of the required money to even qualify. So now, a week before the Jewish New Year, Ottawa listened, and the SIP program got a new name, more flexible rules, and now up to 70% of the cost, from 50% before. And they'll fund more expensive renovations, too, up to $1.5 million projects, when it used to be only $100,000 as a limit. What's making people really happy is that Ottawa will accept applications retroactively to cover 70% of hiring temporary security guards, just as congregations and temples prepare to welcome large crowds of worshippers for the Jewish high holidays and for community gatherings for the one-year commemoration of October 7th.
We live in an upside-down world. We should not need this support. We should not need these extra funds. We should not be the most targeted community across Canada for hate crimes, but we are. So I will give full credit to the federal government for stepping up to the plate.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News and made possible in part with the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation.
This is an audition to be a cantor.
But I don't want to be a cantor.
I wasn't raised with any religion. You're Jewish, though.
The heartbeat of
I welcomed Sam into my community by first taking his foreskin and next showing him the beautiful Twister bagel.
Culturally Jewish is the only podcast covering the weird, wide world of independent Canadian Jewish art.
Listen to Culturally Jewish at the cjn.ca/culture or wherever you get your podcasts.
The federal SIP security program isn't the only source of funding that helps Jewish Canadians feel protected where they worship, study, and practice their culture. Some provinces also kick in grants, and local Jewish federations and synagogues hold their own fundraising campaigns. Some even put security levies on membership dues this year. Statistics Canada says 70% of all hate crime incidents reported to Canadian police last year were against Jews, so It's not surprising that when we at the CJN crunched the numbers for the SIP program, dating back to when it started, Canadian Jews have received more money than any other group, by a long shot. 62% of the money has gone to the Jewish community to date, $22 million. Even though the Jewish population is 400,000, anti-Semitism is so high, Jews need more protection than others. Ottawa awarded Muslim groups just $8 million, or 24% of the funding. Christians came in third, and Sikh and Hindu groups were next in line, but not even close. To learn more about why some Jewish leaders are calling this pre-Rosh Hashanah announcement a game changer, we have several interviews. First, Jason Murray in Vancouver. He heads the community's Security Advisory Committee. Last time we spoke about the federal government's funding for security infrastructure programming. Synagogues were getting firebombed. Of course, Vancouver had one issue at Shar Zedek. And there were challenges to getting money out of the federal government under their existing program. You're getting from BC, the provincial government. You were getting from the federal government, but your own community had to do some serious fundraising. Can you just remind our listeners what that looked like?
Sure. Before October 7th and since, the vast majority of funds that go towards security, whether that's infrastructure or security guards, come from community, regardless of what programs are there through government. The government programs, and the federal one in particular, is one where only a portion of expenses would ever be covered if you were successful in applying for that program and receiving a grant.
You said a lot of community money had to be raised.
Yeah, so before October 7th, 2023, we understood that community institutions in Vancouver, British Columbia, were spending somewhere between $6,000 to $7,000 a month on physical security. After October 7th, that cost ballooned exponentially. In the months following October 7th, the Greater Vancouver community was spending around $100,000 a month for security, and most of that was going to third-party security guards. Institutions that had one would have two. Institutions that had none would have one. Community rallies and gatherings always, at that point onwards, had to have paid security. And that was a cost that we never, as a community, had to bear to that extent up until that time.
So you've had a chance to work on some of those changes, I guess. Did you have input yourself in what you wanted?
Well, the federations, I would say, had input through CJA. I know CJA acts as the advocacy agents for the federations. Expanding and improving the SIP program, the federal program, has been something on CJA's agenda for several years. And it looks to me, as I read what I see of the changes that have been announced, and from what I know of what the organized community, has been advocating for several years, really, there seems to be a fairly good match between what was asked and what's been achieved. I think it also bears mention that this isn't a program directed toward our community. This is for communities at risk. When you look through who receives the funding, you see that these are communities at risk. This is something that I think CJA should get a lot of credit for advocating for, something that will benefit across the Canadian spectrum. But certainly a significant increase to the funding was being asked for, and was really needed. I mean, you see how the program, when it was opened periodically by the federal government, would be oversubscribed very quickly. My understanding of the announcement is that we're looking at something like, in 2024, it'll be $16 million. And then I think the aggregate total over several years is 65. The percentage that will be covered by that program alone has gone significantly up.
As a security advisor, you had to basically fundraise before half of it yourselves, or the community had to get donations and whatever they did. And that was a handicap and a big challenge, wasn't it, for smaller institutions?
I mean, it was a challenge for every institution, but I think I know you're right, that particularly smaller institutions, or institutions that run on a shoestring. We have larger institutions that, because of what they do, don't have a lot of, wiggle room in their budget to invest in capital infrastructure or security guards. They were really hampered by the requirement to leverage so much on their own. Moving that needle over to 70% available, up to, I think, $1.5 million, that I hope is seen as a game changer, especially for those smaller institutions that we're having the challenges in even raising that 50%.
There's another caveat with the 30 that it doesn't all have to be private money. You can still now, from what I understand, include provincial, municipal funding. So if BC gives you guys money, which they are, you can include that now. So you said it was a game changer. So how do you feel about this?
I think it's a bit of a game changer in a few ways. One is the dollars available to communities across the country are bigger. The leverage is probably much more palatable, especially to smaller organizations. On the breadth side of things, now security guards, external security guards, licensed security guards can be covered. That's a significant cost to our community and likely to others. There's also an expansion in the breadth of the type of institution that can apply for the grant and hopefully receive them. Cemetery is an example. Childcare centers are an example. Community institutions that have the same or similar security needs, in some cases even greater security needs than other sort of what you'd say more traditional, but don't have the ability to raise the funds, but we're left out. So this is incredibly important. At the end of the day, the proof's going to be in the pudding as to what is granted based on the applications that are put in.
So does that mean that you're now scrambling because they have this to send in brand new applications? You have to do new stuff?
I don't get a sense of a scramble. For one, we're as a community focused on preparing ourselves for the high holidays, preparing ourselves for commemorations of October 7th. There's real work that's being done and will be done in the coming weeks to right now secure our institutions, secure our community, provide safety, work with law enforcement. So I don't get a sense of a scramble, but and this is only days old. There'll be opportunities. The Federation will be encouraging our partner agencies to, get their work done to prepare their applications for new grant applications.
Is there anything you want to share about what it's going to look like in Vancouver for this fall?
Well, I don't anticipate it will come as a surprise to, certainly to readers, certainly to people in our community, that you will be seeing, or should expect to be seeing, an increased visible presence of private security, volunteer security, and professional local law enforcement around our institutions in the lead up to and certainly during the high holidays and the commemoration of October 7th. It's an unfortunate reality that we have come to welcome the sight of heavy security at our institutions.
The new SIP is retroactive to September the 24th. So doesn't that mean that anybody that wants to hire security guards this year that already had obviously booked them, they're not going to wait till the last minute, they must have booked them, can now get that paid back?
If we're able to make those applications and receive the funding, that will be relieving a significant burden on a community that has already burdened itself caring for its own security needs.
The Centre for Israel and Jewish Affairs, CJA, welcomed the new revamped SIP announcement, and so has Montreal's Jewish Community Council. Their schools and synagogues and even their head office were shot at or the target of Molotov cocktails after October 7th. Gary Gladstone is a Toronto consultant who helps many faith groups apply for federal SIP grants. He joins me now. It's like Christmas in July. You've been asking.
It's all good news. This is absolutely a game changer because this is stuff that we've been asking for forever. And when I say we, I mean the royal we, particularly the Jewish community. So things that came out, number one, security guards. That's a big one. The second, continuous intake. You used to have to wait for the intake except in the emergency, and this is continuous intake starting October the 1st. They used to only give 50%, now they give 70%. You didn't used to be able to stack with other government money, now you can. Obviously not more than 100%, but that only makes sense. Now this one, I haven't figured out how this one works, but organizations may apply for funding and deliver projects on behalf of affiliated eligible recipients. But just from the surface, UJ Federation says, my community is of Tsuris, I need money. Who's my affiliated agencies? Here you go, here you go, here you go. That's huge. If you get the funding that you've requested, then you can cover the security guards back to September 24th. And that will make a substantial difference to every single solitary shul across Canada, period. We all have security guards.
But now you can get more.
The community asked and Trudeau delivered. The purpose of SIP initially was not necessarily to protect, but it was to convict, because everything that SIP did, the video cameras, the lights, etc., it was not necessarily to prevent, it was to be able to identify and capture.
So all these how do they make us safer?
Because now for the first time they're providing time-limited security personnel. That automatically makes you safe. A security guard present can call the police faster, can be alert to what is happening, and can stop and record something as it's happening. They provide people the feeling of safety, knowing that they're being watched by professionals. If someone sees a security guard there, they are less likely to do something because the security guard will assist in some way, shape, or form, even if they're not armed.
Anthony Housefather is the Liberal MP for Mount Royal. He's been pushing for the SIP changes. On the weekend, Housefather announced 15 Jewish projects in his riding will receive a total of $750,000 in federal SIP funding, although the CJN has learned that most of these projects were already published, including last year. Welcome back to the CJN Daily.
Thank you for having me, Ellen.
So on a micro level, how does this make Jewish communities in Canada, and also faith communities who are not Jewish but still under threat, safer?
It allows you to take costs that you are paying and have the government share the burden with you up to 70%. Or alternatively, if you haven't been paying the cost because you've been unable to make the security infrastructure improvements to your buildings, it will allow you to do so. It will allow you to better afford security guards. It will allow you to better afford cameras or bulletproof doors or whatever that you want to do. So it doesn't deal with the underlying problem, right? Security coverage means that we're making you more secure in your buildings. It doesn't deal with the problem outside of those buildings of somebody that wants to attack them. You have to have a multifaceted approach, but to say, well, this is useless because you're not solving anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has existed for millennia. It goes up and down in surges. It's right now way up. But of course, this is helpful and important that we can protect our buildings and make sure that somebody who otherwise would have attacked it can't attack it, because you have preventative measures and you have security and you have stability. For example, there was an attack that was thwarted at the Shara Shemayim last year because of the security infrastructure program.
I think it was 2 years ago, but yeah, the last war. Besides doing this, which is fortifying the house, how can this sit with the Jewish community when there are other things the government has been doing, as you know, that you're not happy with either, which is, pivoting towards more support for the Palestinian state, UNRWA, stopping arms? How is this timely Rosh Hashanah gift being received?
I mean, I think it's being received very well. I think again, you have to take the foreign policy where I frequently disagreed with the government and domestic policy. And different things that people are unhappy with domestically are different levels of government, and usually it's not the federal government. Again, policing of demonstrations is municipal. Enforcement of the criminal code is provincial.
Right, but UNRWA and the voting in the United Nations.
UNRWA, giving money to UNRWA, and I don't agree with giving money to UNRWA, I voted against it in the House of Commons, but I don't believe that threatens a Jewish synagogue or school in Canada. Right? So we now need to talk about domestic anti-Semitism, where I think we are doing a lot. In fact, right now, I had moved a motion at the Justice Committee last year to have a study on anti-Semitism. We had witnesses and it concentrated on college campuses, even though that's provincial jurisdiction. And right now I'm part of a committee in the Justice Committee drafting a report with recommendations to all levels of government, federal, provincial, universities, with what we see as what they need to do. There are victories, that we have. IRGC was designated a terrorist organization. I'm pushing very hard for Samadoun to be designated. I'm pushing now for the bubble legislation that we've discussed that would create a new intimidation defense to better offense to better protect Jewish community buildings. But one thing doesn't stop another. We can work on anti-Semitism and fight anti-Semitism while at the same time being prudent and securing Jewish community buildings.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Shellen. Have a great day.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, made possible in part by the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Special thanks to our data analysts for the CJN, David Weiss, and to Daniel Kula. The Daily is produced by Zachary Kauffman. Our executive producer is Michael Fraiman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Don't forget to check out the CJN's website for a longer print story. Thanks for listening.